through of the agenda. I'm going to go through what Great Big Green Week is, a couple of ideas for events, although we'll leave that mostly to the experts just afterwards, and a quick note about the funding available if you wanted to run a Great Big Green Week. After that, the Great SustFest team is going to talk about how to run a Great Big Green Week locally, which we're hoping you'll all be able to run in September. So let's go right through. Next slide, please. Great Big Green Week happens between the 18th and the 26th of September, about 2 months before COP26. It's a week-long set of events, and the idea is that everybody should be able to join. So one of the main features of our website is that you should be able to rock up to the website, type in your postcode, and you should be able to find events in your area. Let's go to the next slide. That's how it works. You should be able to, you can see on the right-hand side there, the map where you should be able to find events in your area. And it works in 2 different ways. For local coordinators, and hopefully that's all of us in this room, we'll be coordinating Green Weeks and festivals, organising events, putting them together, arranging things like insurance and going through all of the steps which SustFest are going to take us through, and encouraging people to get involved, advertising the events, all of that sort of stuff. And for citizens, your average person who's going to be rocking up to the events, they should be able to find things in their local areas and travel further afield if they're interested in something a bit further. Next slide, please. So here are a bunch of ideas. I'm not going to go through them all. I'll let you have a quick read while I'm talking. But I think the main point on this is that existing events count too. So if you already have a walking group, or you already have a clothes swap that you do monthly, or things like that, even if you've already got events that you're planning on doing sometime near September, it'd be great to just do the same thing that you're already doing, that you're already planning, just in that week in September. Next slide, please. Funding is available. We're really hoping to seed a few Great Big Green Weeks. The applications are actually open already. We're going to start looking at them from April 26th next week. But if you go to the website at greatbiggreenweek.com/funding, you'll see more details there. And there's also an email address if you have any questions. Hopefully the process is nice and clear, but we'd really like funding not to be a stumbling block. If you feel like there's something that you really need to make your Great Big Green Week happen, and please do get in touch. There is funding available. Next slide. And this is the last bit from me. I just wanted to take you through some of the important milestones and just kind of give you a picture of how this all fits together and why we're doing this in the first place. So we'll start off right at the end at COP26. COP26 happening in November of this year, hopefully. And we're hoping that September, just before that, will be a bit of a focal point. So Great Big Green Week takes place from the 18th, and we're really hoping that will be a time when every single person in the UK will be taking part in something. So right from the beginning, April now is when we're hoping to create all the resources that we need, get people thinking about what kinds of events you're going to have, coming up with things like the names of your local festivals and things like that. In June, there's going to be a big promo push. So we've got teams working on PR and media and things like that. So we're really hoping that between June and July, there'll be lots of stuff going on just before the summer where the general public will be able to see what's going on in their area. So we're really encouraging people to try and get as much as they can up on the website by then. And that's the time to start engaging our local politicians. And the idea is that hopefully in June, we'll engage with politicians, tell them what asks we have, what we want them to do for COP26, and later on be able to hold them to account. We're doing some work right now to figure out what those asks are, and we're hoping we'll be able to share them in the not too distant future to say, well, here's what we want citizens to get involved in, here's what we want them to write to their MPs about, and this is what we really hope we'll be able to make a really big difference on. I think that's all from me, and I'm going to hand over to Gail from Sustainable St Albans. And just to let you know, there is a good long Q&A at the end of this session. So, there will be some people from Great Big Green Week here to help answer any questions later on, but you can also pop them into the chat, and you're very welcome to also introduce yourselves in the chat. Thank you. Over to Gail.
Thank you, Azora. And I think I might be handing you back to Jazz for one of the polls. Is that right, Jazz?
Yes, so we have a few polls for you all to fill in. The first one is where you're joining us from. So we'd love to know where organisers are coming from all across the country. So I'll launch that poll now. This is the first one, and we have a few more coming up, but I don't think we can do them all at the same time. So I'll just give you 1 minute to fill that in, and then we'll launch the next one.
That's really great. Yeah, just give us an idea of where people are from. Or no one from London. Anyone from London?
I'm from London.
I put London in at the last moment thinking, I bet everybody will be from London. It's great. Has everyone done it? Nearly. One more? I think that should do, should it? Yeah.
Great. Thank you all so much.
So we got 44% from the south of England and 25% from the north. I'm glad there's some northerners here and two people from Wales too. And let's not forget the Midlands. Oh, that's brilliant. I'm glad. So people are from all around. That's lovely, Jazz. Thank you very much.
We do have one more one before, Gail, you start. So we'd love to know if you have any prior experience of organising a large event or festival before, and there are a few options there. So again, just take a few minutes. Let's fill that one in, sorry about that.
Okay, that's great. So we've got about 50-50 there. So 50-50 for none at all and for a little. Okay, all right. So we're ready to rock then. There you go. That's lovely, Jazz. Exactly 50-50. All right, thanks, Jazz. Can that go?
Yeah, I will share your presentation now.
Well, Jazz has got to do all the work here because she's also got to put the screens up, hasn't she? There we go. Oh, well done. I've still got a poll in my thing. I can get rid of it personally. Is everybody okay? They can all see the screen. That's fabulous. If you can't see the screen, what we'd like you to do is at the somewhere on your screen, probably at the bottom, you should have a chat button. And if you can use it during this session, that would be fantastic. So we will have time for questions at the end, but if you have some comments or thoughts or questions as we're going along, please just type them in the chat button to everybody. And Jazz will keep an eye on that as we're going through the session. And if you're really desperate to ask something, you can always use the reaction button that you've got, and you can put your hand up, and Jazz will be keeping an eye on those as well. Is that okay, Jazz? Not giving you too much to do there.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
Zora will also be on hand to help with any questions as well.
Great, that's fantastic. So hi, my name is Gail Jackson, and together with Catherine Ross and Jill Watson today, we're all from the group Sustainable St Albans, and we work across St Albans, Harpenden and the villages around our area. And we're going to be taking you through some of the main elements on how to design a festival from scratch. The reason we're doing it is because we've had quite a go at doing this ourselves. We've organised 5 festivals over the past 5 years. Well, this is our 5th. And we're delighted to be involved in this session here to help people think about the Great Big Green Week, which is a fantastic idea. Okay, Jazz, so I think we're going over to Catherine.
Hello. So if it makes you feel better, I saw that 53% of you said that you've got no experience of doing something like this before. When we began, we had none either. So going back to 2015, we started small. We hadn't done anything like this before. We started out in 2015 because it was the Paris climate talks that year, COP21 as it was then. And we wanted to try and do something that year that acknowledged the Paris climate talks. And we were a small group, a mixture from Transition St Albans as we were then and the local Friends of the Earth. And I imagine, like a lot of your groups, perhaps we had put a lot of effort into arranging our own events, and we would get a great speaker and we would put on our own event, and then 20 people would turn up and we'd go, oh, what about the other 140,000 people in our districts? You know, where were they? And we had this sort of light bulb moment that instead of trying to put on our own events and not having as many people come to them as we would love, what if instead we put on a festival and we said to lots of other groups in the district, you arrange something that suits you and your members, and we'll be the hub in the wheel. We'll coordinate the programme and we'll do a lot of the marketing, but you put on events that suit you. And through that way, we thought this might work. You know, we might be able to reach far more people who are interested in climate and environmental issues, but wouldn't necessarily come to a speaker meeting that Transition St Albans had laid on. And we really hoped that would work as a focus for our community to come together in that way. So we started by asking the people that we knew, did they want to take part? And at that point, we thought maybe we'd get 30 events. And then by the end, when we actually ran it in the November, we had 100 events. I mean, we were blown away by it. And out of the blue came lots of groups who got involved with us who hadn't really worked with us before. So we found there were all these groups who they cared about the climate, they cared about protecting nature, they did practical things like litter picking, local schools who wanted to get involved and do things with their kids on recycling crafts or saving water or school gardening. It was this whole network of organisations that wanted to do something, and we gave them an umbrella that they could come under, an umbrella all to do with nature and the environment that they could gather under, and suddenly collectively we could be much more successful and much louder than we had ever been before. I think you're up next, Jill, aren't you, to say people what a festival actually looks like?
Yes. So if we go to the next slide, yeah, just this in this little section, you can see on these images here, this is just a selection of events that have previously been run. But this is just really to mention that you can make the festival within kind of whatever format, you know, suits you really. We, at the moment this year, we're doing a 2-week festival of events, as Catherine has just explained, all different community groups. They put together their events and we kind of coordinate that. So it's kind of multiple events across 2 weeks, coordinated into, you know, a programme as such. All events are about environmental sustainability, obviously, and they're within the geographical location that we've defined, so within our district. So it could be your town or district, or however you kind of choose to go forward. So you choose your format. You can then obviously choose kind of, you know, if you have a particular kind of definition of what you want to have included. But, you know, as we've just seen, we've had litter picks, plastic-free picnics, family bike rides. You can see things like clothes swishes. People might do exhibitions, and it can, you know, fit within the model that you want to promote, basically, and aim really, if possible, to kind of have as far a reach as you can, you know, as you can imagine. So, you know, don't limit yourself to a few groups, you know, keep it as open so that people can be involved if they can. And the next
Jill,
one.
if I can just add, can I just go back to that slide, Jazz? If I can just add, all the photos that you see there are photographs of the events that have been run during our festival. And that's another thing to remember is images are very powerful, and it's great to get people to take their own photos. Thanks, Jess.
So a really important thing, if you're sitting there joining this session because you're thinking, we're interested, how would we do our own Great Big Green Week, is one really important place for you to start is to think, who are the key partners in your area that you would need to make this work? So for us, these 4 organisations were kind of the key start point for it for us. So Sustainable St Albans, can't even say it, and it's my organisation, Sustainable St Albans. So Gail and I are both trustees of Sustainable St Albans, and we were in right from the beginning in 2015, although at the time we were called Transition St Albans. So we were in right from the beginning, and the very first people that we spoke to were our local Friends of the Earth group, because they were our most like-minded other local environmental group, and we knew this was a bit too big for us to try and do it alone. So if you've got a bit of paper near where you're sitting, I would kind of write down, is there another local group that leaps to mind where you think, oh, we could do it in partnership with them, that would really help us get together an organising group. So we very early on reached out to Friends of the Earth, and right from the beginning, our volunteer organising group was drawn with volunteers from Sustainable St Albans and Friends of the Earth St Albans. And then the council, we are lucky that our council has a sustainability officer, and we had an existing relationship there, and so we spoke to the council, and on the very first year they agreed that they would have their logo on the flyers and the materials that we put out around our first Sustainable St Albans week. And over time that relationship has developed. It's had the old rocky moment that we've had to manage, but generally it's been very productive, the relationship with the council. So for example, they've done things like that for us, like put articles in their community news that goes out to every household, so that every household heard about it. That didn't cost the council any more money because they're doing community news anyway, but for us it's amazing because it gets something out to every household. They've also agreed to put a leaflet for us about the festival in with the council tax mailing when it goes out each year. So again, it's not costing them extra money because they're doing the mailing anyway. And for us, it's really good because it gets the word out. They also are in charge of things like banner sites around the town if you want to have banners up. Certainly our local council is in charge of a whole bunch of the public notice boards. So having a relationship there where they're willing to put up notices for you is really useful. So think for yourself, do you have a good relationship there with the council? Do you know who you would reach out to locally? And then for us, the other key piece of the puzzle early on was bioregional. They have a framework for defining what sustainability means. And it's really nice and colourful. I think, Gail, you talk about it in a little bit, don't you? So I won't say too much now. But bioregional were really, really positive about us using their framework in all of our materials. And that gave us a really engaging way of explaining to people what we meant by sustainability if they weren't people who were already in the field. So for you, if you've got your bit of paper and a pen, think, who do we need in right at the beginning if we're going to make a Great Big Green Week work where we are?
Okay.
Jill,
Jazz?
tell us about forming a core team.
Okie dokie. So kind of leading on from that, really, because obviously, hopefully you've thought about who you want to work with and maybe where you might get some volunteers from. The next thing is really to gather a core team. You definitely need a chair, because you need somebody that can kind of just, lead and possibly make decisions if things are kind of 50-50. So the core organising team really should be, a smallish subgroup, hopefully, of people that have got a bit of dedicated time, because even though the majority is going to be volunteer time, you're still going to have certain things that you need to achieve in certain time frames. So, and then within that, you can have subgroups of people or certain individuals on the team that might take responsibility for liaising with a certain area, or schools, faith groups, to work on graphics, etc. We do have paid contracts for key tasks, because as with anything, if you're leading a project, like I was saying, you are going to have things that need to be delivered at a certain time frame, and that helps very much keep things on track. so that, you know, there's a definition of who is accountable to get certain key tasks done. But it's important to have kind of like as wide a group as possible to allow for creative, free-flowing ideas, really. So really, we try and involve as many people as possible at ideas stages, and then it tends to fall to a more core group of people to actually kind of, you know, define who does which work. So I want to mention at this stage that when we're talking about paid contracts and things like that, I think there is funding possibly from Great Big Green Week, and I think they will also mention that later again. So that's something to consider if you're thinking about organising one. And also for things like if you want to do design for graphics and posters, that's something else that we have paid for in our projects. So again, there might be some money for those things. I don't know whether I had anything else to add on that page. I think that's good. Hopefully you'll get a range of people that have different skills, so that, you know, you can get most of the areas covered. But the important thing is to ask as many people as possible, and hopefully you'll get a good core team together.
Okay. Jazz, just to say, I'll do this slide, and then maybe I think we've got an interesting poll that we can also do before we move on after this. Am I right? It's hard, I can't see anyone.
Yes,
yeah.
we do have another poll to do.
Yeah, that's the one about what your concerns are. Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Okay, so it's very strange doing this without being able to see people. This slide now, we're looking at what the basics are of setting up either, we're calling it, we run a festival, but you may just be running a few events, or you might be running a whole one-day event possibly. We didn't know where we were going when we began, as Catherine said, and we didn't know about the basics, but when we look back, this is what we did. As Jill has mentioned, we defined the area, because if you're going to invite people to run events, you want to know where you're going to invite them from. We did get somebody from the Midlands this year trying to take part in our festival in St Albans, and we had to very politely decline them because we kept it very local. But so just define your place. It could be your town or a village. We chose a political boundary of the political district. After that, you need to work out how are you going to define the kind of events that people are going to run. You may be a bike enthusiast, and you might choose to say, actually, all we're going to do is have people getting on their bikes in different ways, whether it's family bike rides or whether it's, you know, riding through the town to do a demonstration. But you need to think about what the nature of your events are. And we'll look at that in a minute. And of course, set your time. The Great Big Green Week has got the dates from the 18th to the 26th of September. You could go for something that lasted all that length of time, and that would be a big festival. You could choose one day within that period, or just a couple of weekends, but define it early on, and then you know what you're working with. So I think that now we've looked at those basics there, I think it might be a good time, Jazz, to ask people if they'll join in that poll. Yeah, go for it.
Great, thank you, Gail. Yeah, so we have a poll that I'm going to launch now, which is just for you to share some of your biggest concerns for organising events or organising a Great Big Green Week. So there are some options there, but if you can't see an option that applies to you that's not there, pop it in the chat so we can have a look at some of your different concerns. Just double checking that everyone can see the poll. Okay, we're getting responses in now. Okay, so I think that's most people. So we've got a range of responses. A few people have concerns about finding partners to work with. A few people are concerned about finding the time to organise something as big as this. We've got some people concerned about groups not getting involved, people not attending events, and for your Green Week or your event to not have enough impact. So thank you all for sharing those. And I'm sure there'll be some sections in this presentation that will sort of help you overcome those concerns.
Okay, that's really useful, especially the worry about groups not getting involved. In fact, for us, although we had no idea what would happen at the beginning, the biggest, what's the word? The biggest feeling of satisfaction, it was extraordinary that people did want to be involved. But we began, remember, by using our own network. So once you've got your own partner or partners set up, you've got to think about how many people each one of you in that small group knows. And you've got to start building a network of people to get out there and tell more people. And it happened very quickly for us, actually. So that actually wasn't a concern for us as we went on. And people did get involved, but some of that is about your promotion and your publicity. Let's move on, Jazz. That was lovely to hear back a little bit from the audience here. Thank you. Well, whilst we hold some of those thoughts in our head about some of the problems that you might be faced with, we'll just look here. Catherine mentioned earlier bioregional. You may have come across them or maybe not. They created this rather lovely set of 10 principles to explain what they meant by sustainability or by living sustainably. And we loved them from the off. We actually sought very specific permission from bioregional. That means we emailed them and we waited for their email response to ask if we could use these for our festival. The reason we like them, if you see there, is because they don't just include the usual green type things. It brings in health and happiness, which is such a lovely one, and equity and culture and community. And by having these in there, it meant we could reach out to broader groups, because people said things like, well, I don't know, how can I do something about reducing carbon emissions? And actually what we asked, we said, well, you know, if you're a local women's group, why don't you help with another event and bake the cakes for it? You know, and then they became part of the event that was happening. They had to use vegetarian ingredients, and but they then were able to become involved. We had a lovely group of women who got involved from the Asian community, and they kind of met together every week to bring their groups to bring their community together. And that was again part of building the strengths of our local communities and making sure people are happy. We also have got yoga groups involved, running yoga sessions out in the park. I think that's one this year. And of course they can be involved, because the more we work together, we keep ourselves fit, we enjoy the outside. It's all part of the same issues. Of course, majorly, most people will be getting involved because of some of these other things here. So if you look at land use and wildlife, you know, whether it's the RSPB or whether it's the Hearts, we have a Middlesex and Wildlife Trust to get involved. We've, on the sustainable waterfront, we found our local water provider have been very keen on taking part. So we have Affinity work here locally, and they've run big events on helping people to reduce the water that they waste. And they were just keen to have something to give them a chance to show off their work on that. most of us nowadays have got people doing local and sustainable food, grow your own projects. We've got several here, or refill pantries or refill shops that encourage people not to use plastic, local markets, or local farmers markets, or local producers who are selling local food, that sort of thing. Sustainable materials, in fact, I can't think of anything on sustainable materials like clothes swishes, so reusing clothes. Sustainable transport, of course, is bikes and electric cars and electric bikes, and walking more, using public transport. Zero waste. Again, our local people who do the recycling were also keen to get involved here. One year they ran, they did a tour to the local recycling area. We went and saw where all our compost was being made from all our garden waste. And another year got to see what they did with their food waste. They were burning it to make electricity, and they actually ran a tour for us to walk around. It was very popular. They ran it 3 times, I think, over 2 weeks. And zero carbon, of course, there's masses of whether people want to do a talk about reducing carbon emissions, watch films. So that's the extent of how we explained what we wanted people to do, and we loved it. You can use what you like, of course, but if you're interested, remember you have to get their permission. Thanks, Jazz.
So, fundraising. I can't tell you how fortunate I think your groups might be if you are going to run your first event like this. The fact that there's some funding there from the Climate Coalition. When we began, it was a completely blank sheet of paper, and then the most recent, all the logos here are the different people that we got either funding or gifts in kind for to run our most recent festival that actually happened, which was 2019. 2020 was cancelled because of COVID, and 2021's coming up soon. And just looking at those logos, you just get a sense of quite how much work there is piecing it together and making applications and approaching businesses and finding different pots of money from different people and different gifts in kind from different people. Now, for your Great Big Green Week, it's up to you to think how big and ambitious you're going to be. Are you going to do a one-day event where you're hiring a school hall and actually it's all volunteers, in which case the funding that you need is much, much less, especially if you can find a local venue that will donate you the venue for free for the day, which is possible. So it might be that your budget for your festival is quite small. Because our one has become, over the course of 5 years, ours become so big and so successful with, Jill will tell you how many events it is this year, 150, I think we have this year. And so we have
150, yeah.
So if you can picture running a festival with 150, we're at the other end of that spectrum. So the budget is kind of in the low 20s of thousands, and that has involved a lot of fundraising, but then that covers us having a paid coordinator who's working part-time to arrange the program and liaise with all the groups, and it covers us having communication support, a few hours a week from a local person who's really good at comms, and she does social media and newsletters. It's also covered for us the graphic design of our program, our logos, our flyers, and then other marketing activities. There's quite a lot that goes into marketing in terms of websites and flyers and posters and banners and everything that comes with the festival. So if you take us as one end of that spectrum, where we're, I think, something like £25,000 the full budget this year, but yours might be at the other end of the spectrum and be the local school hall or church hall and volunteer effort. And it's just useful for you to think through, what do we want our Big Green Week to be like? And then think through what kind of budget that might need. Think of the different areas of cost around the coordinating, the communicating, design and printing of any materials, and then think about where you might be able to get that from. And for us, it's been a combination of grant funding. So the biggest thing is that each year we've been successful with an Awards for All grant from the lottery. Then we've had a range of other smaller grants from people here like Tesco. And then not in the first year when we hadn't established ourselves, but over time, as we've got more established, we've now been able to start getting some business, local businesses who pay to have a page in our program or other kinds of sponsorship, because they support what we do and they see that the people we're reaching out to are people that business wants to have aware of them and their services. And then some really useful bits of gifts in kind. So for example, the Odyssey, who's on here, that's our local independent cinema. And the Odyssey were absolutely amazing, saying to us, if we could make a small film, they would show it with the trailers. So that doesn't cost the Odyssey any money, in that they're showing trailers anyway. And for us, it was amazing because it meant everyone who sat down to watch a film would see our advert amongst the trailers there. So we count that as a really valuable bit of gift in kind. So again, if you've got your bit of paper and your pen next to you, it's just worth kind of thinking, are you aware of any pots of funding locally? Does your local parish council, does your local city council offer any grants? Can you think of a local business where you're like, oh, I bet they would be keen to be involved? Just kind of thinking that through, both on the cost side and on the income side, what your big green week might look like. And obviously later when we've finished, you're going to hear about what the Climate Coalition might be able to do to help you there. So what does it make to run a successful festival? These green boxes are what we think have been our success factors. So partnerships. It's really important to say we've got partnerships and networking and team working. So much of this is about people, isn't it? Partnerships, relationships, teamwork, volunteers. When we approached this, it's a really different philosophy for us. Instead of thinking we are running our event, instead it's saying we are supporting other people to run their events. It's a really sort of generous act of saying we collectively will achieve more together by, if a lot of groups run events that suit them, that we support, that we so the practicalities of it is a local group, say the local cycling campaign. They think, oh, okay, we'll get involved, we'll run a bike ride. They register it with us, so we get the information, we pull that together into the program, and then we do lots of marketing through the local paper, through the local radio. Gail's going to tell you all about that side. And it's really key to come to it with that philosophy that it's not about you, it's about you supporting other groups to achieve more and to be that umbrella that I spoke about at the beginning. I always think it's a little bit like the difference between inviting people for dinner and you're cooking all the food and deciding what's on the table versus doing a potluck supper. It's a slightly different kind of philosophy, but it ends up with something delicious and wonderful. Other things that are really important, fundraising, we've spoken about, communication we're coming on to. For us, we're a market town, and so we've been able to get even more ambitious and be part of the market. Volunteers, finding enough people and really looking after them well. I mentioned partnership, and I'm going to come back to it a little bit more, and it's come out from what Gail said as well, that the festival is all about that partnership. So many of the groups who we've been involved with through the festival aren't ones that Sustainable St Albans had any contact with beforehand. When we started in 2015, we started by writing to the groups we already knew that we thought were likely to get involved. And we said, oh, it's going to be Sustainable St Albans Week, or for you, it's going to be Big Green Week. It's going to be in September. And you write to the groups you know best, and some of them say yes. And then after we'd got our first few that said yes, then we started writing out to groups who were sort of in the next circle out that we thought they might want to get involved, and we had some point of contact there. And we started saying, it's going to be, in your words, it's going to be the Big Green Week, it's going to be in September. And all these groups are already taking part, and we were able to mention the ones who had already said yes. And so then that made it sound really convincing. And so then those groups started saying yes. And then we started reaching out to the next circle. And it got to the point by the time our first festival ran that we had groups contacting us and going, why weren't we invited? We were like, everyone was invited. We've had local eco businesses come forward who were keen to be part of it. We've had some big organisations like Affinity Water who wanted to do things in our local area who got in touch. We make a real effort to try and reach out and make sure it's representative of our whole district. So we've put quite a bit of thought into that, and you'll have to think how this maps onto your geography. But for us, we've got St Albans, then we've got Harpenden, we've got the villages. So we've made real effort to think, how do we reach out to groups, not just in St Albans itself, but how do we make sure it's district-wide, contacting the parish councils, for example, so that we knew that the villages knew that, that they could take part. We've made real effort to try and reach out to different faith groups within our district. Churches, mosques, synagogue. We've made real efforts to reach out to the schools. So the first year that was just really contacting the admin at address for each of our local schools, but over time we've got a network now of contacts in quite a lot of the schools. So we've got a named contact rather than the admin at. But if you're beginning at the beginning, then admin at email address for your local schools is probably the good enough place to start. I'd say, like we said at the beginning, kind of start small, start with the people that you know. Say you've got someone in your volunteer organising group who's the mum or dad of a child at the local primary school. Well, use that contact, get in touch with the school and say, my child's at your school and we're doing this festival, does your school want to be part of it? If you've got someone in your organising group who's a keen cyclist with a local cycling group, go to them first. Use those networks, contact your local councillors and tell your local councillors that this is happening, it's something that local people care about, and how can they make sure that other groups get involved. I think I've said everything I meant to on that page. Jill, you're up next.
Yes, well, I'm afraid it's inevitable that we had to have a COVID safe slide. And to be honest, throughout this year, when we've been organising our SustFest, we've had to have some kind of COVID conversation for pretty much most of the meetings that we've had. Obviously, we've had to consider the challenges of organising a festival with these restrictions in place this year, and initially, even if it was going to go ahead. But thankfully now we're moving forward, and hopefully by the time the Great Big Green Week goes ahead, we'll be pretty much out of restriction. But we may still be in a situation where you might have to specifically ask groups to make sure that their events are COVID safe. I mean, considerations that we've had that hopefully we wouldn't have going forward would be that historically a lot of events would have been face-to-face and, you know, physical meetups, and numbers have been very restricted and still are for those kind of things. So moving towards online events and things like that, excuse me. But what we've had to do was just kind of take enough time to think about how to make it work around the restrictions, but also just making sure that people arranging events have thought about it. And when it comes down to kind of the official kind of, you know, looking at health and safety, ask your counsellor to offer an advice session or put links to advice on holding COVID safe events. So it's really been a focus that we've had to make a big effort on this year. But as I say, things are getting better, and the enthusiasm for local groups to still run events has still been there. What we found this year is that we were really concerned with all the restrictions that people would just be completely put off having an event. But actually, the majority of people have found a way of working around the restriction and still having an event, you know, holding a film, doing online Zoom kind of, you know, discussions, or doing a task and then coming together to have an online discussion, small group tasks or activities. You know, the enthusiasm has still been there. So don't be put off completely by, you know, if there is a restriction still around. You know, we can still promote what we can do rather than, you know, what we're not allowed to do. So that was really just the main consideration for the COVID safe aspect. I should say we have had a lot of support from our local council on that as well. So that's been hugely helpful. Okay, what are we moving on? Oh, sponsorship. So this has been touched on a little bit in previous slides, but actually we've found that our local business sponsorships and community sponsors, it's kind of through the years it's changed very slightly, so we've become a bit more not dependent on it, but we've encouraged those relationships a little bit more, as I think Catherine was mentioning earlier. So with business sponsorships, it's been kind of nice to obviously we ask for the sponsorship and we get an amount of money for the sponsorship, but we have to think about what we offer to a sponsor in return. Do we give them adverts, or can they write a blog for our social media, or can we both share social media and like promote each other? But I think the important thing here that I wanted to point out was that this has now become a two-way street, very much, that we work together almost like the partnership side of things do, and every time we get involved with a business sponsorship, it opens up kind of another set of doors for maybe another group of people that want to be involved. Don't underestimate how many companies kind of like talk to each other, especially if you're within a local area. So it's been really, really good. And there's a point there, aim higher than you first might think. If you're going to set up some sponsorship packages, maybe why not ask for a little bit more than you maybe think you're going to get, because a lot of companies do have corporate social responsibility. So they're actively looking for people to sponsor. And again, at the bottom there, it just says, will you give back? Use the internet, social media, press releases, banners, and you promote them, and you get a lot from that relationship. It's not just kind of a we need sponsors, we'll take the cash, but obviously the cash is nice, but it develops into a very good partnership as well. I think maybe on the next slide as well. So this graphic here just shows you a big selection of who we've had involved in our SustFest events over the years. So you can see lots of different, some national and some kind of local businesses. So there's lots and lots of names on there, just really to show you that the partnership and networking can be a big range of groups. You'll see, but you might not, hopefully you'll be able to make out, there's schools on there. The schools have been doing their sustainability weeks. The Girl Guides and the Rainbows have done things like litter picks. And then we've got kind of, businesses as well, like ACOM. This year they're doing quite a few very significant. Sorry, I accidentally went on mute there. They're doing some really big events to, just help information share. So really, really good, interesting events that are, really different from some of the community events as well. So harness the energy of the local groups, and put the invite out there to anybody you can think of, because you might be surprised. There might be people that you think, oh no, they're not really sustainable, they're not going to get involved, but a lot of people have a sustainability plan and do want to work towards sustainability. So don't be shy, basically ask whoever you think you might be able to link in with it, because the more the merrier, really. Get a range of reach if you can do.
Jazz, can you go back to that slide for me, because it was just making me think of because people earlier, I think on the poll, said they were worried that other people might not get involved. And when I look at this slide, I think, blimmin' heck, all these people, and this is just a very small section of the people, of the 100 groups we have involved. But of course, we didn't start that way. We started with a group of about 5 people sitting around a table saying, who do we know? Who can we write to? So, you know, obviously when you start off, you're not going to get all these kind of people wanting to run events with you. We're putting that there, though, to show you the possibility. These are the sorts of people that you can get involved. Don't be put off. That's what it is. Thanks, Jazz. Move on to the next one. So this is about what we did to try and contact people. And as I said, it's about networking. So you start with the 5 people in the room, and then, you know, if you get a yes from somebody, you say, do you know anyone you can ask? That's all it is. We started to build a mailing list of people that we knew, and we got them to agree to be on the mailing list. Think about your data protection. But then we could start sending out newsletters. I mean, we were already one group, so we had people in our mailing list already, and we could go to them. And maybe you've got that already in one of the small groups that you're involved with. But we began to build a mailing list for the festival, and to started sending out newsletters. We used MailChimp, a free, we got a free account with them. There are other newsletter providers. Again, we don't spend a lot of money on this stuff. We were always very positive and very optimistic. We collected people's logos. So as soon as people started saying, yes, I want to be involved, or even, yes, I'm interested, we got the logos that they had, and we started putting them up on our social media saying, you know, the scouts are here and they want to be involved in our festival. And then, you know, you link up to the scouts, and then the scouts will start sharing it to other people. We did a very simple registration form at the beginning for people to get involved. So we just wanted to make sure we had names and details and so on. And one thing that we did right from early on was we said, we're not going to be responsible for everyone's events. So we made sure that we had tick boxes in our forms to say people have to get their own insurance. And we also asked them to do their own publicity as well. We would do what we could. And we asked them to go around and take photographs, so that photographs could be used again on social media, or we could use them afterwards. I'm thinking something else at this point, which is that some of the groups on here, if you've come via Climate Coalition, you may be more upfront politically engaged than it appears this festival was. And I just want to say that even though a lot of our groups, can we go back again, Jazz, to that slide with the logos? So these aren't politically engaged groups. I mean, there are some. We actually invited all groups, including political parties. But we wanted to get our message out to as many people as possible. And to do that, even though some of us in our group were quite political, and probably much more radical, we softened our tone, I think, in order to engage as many groups as possible. That was our approach. You can do it your way, but that might just explain a little bit about some of the softness of the way we went about our festival. Okay, Jazz, thank you. I think the next one as well. So this is really about how do you promote the events, and people said this was one of their big concerns about getting people to come along to the events when they took place. Of course, now everything at the moment, there's so much online. We use Eventbrite a lot to publicise our things, publicise events, and social media too. But we developed a good relationship with our local press. We didn't know how to do that before, but what we did was we emailed the editor, and we ended up, we realised that editors of local newspapers quite enjoy having, a little bit of being nice to them, and maybe take them out for lunch, spend a bit of time. And again, it's about giving back. If the local press are going to be positive with promoting your festival, what can you give them back? Can you advertise them? We had a website. We set it up ourselves on WordPress, a very simple, basic website. You may have something already, or you may want to create one specifically for the Great Big Green Week. And I think there's some resources available on the Great Big Green Week site that might guide you in that way. Think about local magazines and local radio. Can you get interviews on your local radio station? Market stalls, we have markets where we are, and they were very useful for reaching, again, beyond the usual suspects. So we would hand out flyers or just have people come and chat to us. And blogs, just using social media properly, but using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the blogs which we would get sent around, asking people to engage with your social media. And again, photographs. The local press love pictures of people smiling. And this here, you can see a lovely one of Jill in her garden with the banner, because we're in lockdown when we took this. But that got us a lovely press release. And that's the sort of thing that the press love. Down below, you see our stall that we ran in 1 year. I can't see what year it is. And we had this little phrase that we developed and proved very popular. I think this was yours, Catherine, this phrase, but we love our district and we want it to be sustainable for future generations to come. And we still use it. It's enduring. Thanks, Jazz. Is this me again? Yeah, I'll go for it then. We developed, prior to lockdown and prior to this year, we developed a system of printing brochures and programmes. This year we're going much more online. And the Great Big Green Week has got free e-listings that you can use. So you can advertise your event through the e-listings that they've got. So you don't have to think about brochures. You might want to put some information up on your website about your events, or you might want to do some flyers which kind of give highlights or posters. So it's worth thinking about that. We worked out early on that it was worth getting a professional designer in. We met a few of them, and we chose one who would do it for a small amount of money, but was excellent. And again, the designers wanted to get involved and help with the project. But you can see that picture there. That's the picture of our flyer this year. And we love the bright colours, it's engaging to lots of people, and we couldn't have done that without a professional designer. Again, just use what you've got. Use your web, use your social media. If you haven't got social media, find someone who can help you and set it up. If you can't do it very well, just, ask around. Yeah. It's not always the youngsters who can do it best, by the way. But okay, Jazz, move on. Thank you. Catherine, I think it's for you.
Yeah, this is me. So we've been describing the big 2-week-long festival that we do. This marketplace event might be more something like where you might want to start, which is within the big festival. We have a specific event called the Market Takeover. So as I said, in St Albans, we've got the market. So this idea evolved from the fact that the first couple of years we ran the festival, some of the smaller groups locally said, could we be part of something? Could we, Sustainable St Albans, arrange something that the smaller groups could have our stall at, rather than them putting each on their own individual event? And so I think it was the third time we ran the festival, we took over a school. We had information stalls inside, and then we had like a repair area, and we had local cakes and loveliness. And then outside we had cycling and bike repairing and gardening, and that was all in a local school. And we had, I think, 400 people come, and it was amazing. And then everyone finished that day saying to us, oh, next year you should take over the market. And we were like, ha 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 at the time. And then we were like, all right, let's do it then. So the year afterwards, we took over the whole of the middle of St Albans. I don't know if you've ever been, but we have a big street market right from one end of town to the other. So we had our first market takeover where all of the stalls of the whole market were to do with sustainable living. And then we had what you can see in the big photograph, which is the music stage, where we had local bands come along and play. We had vegetarian and vegan food. We had bicycles. We had just everything you can imagine going on, including an XR funeral march that went through the middle of the market takeover, and just kind of added to the wonderful buffet of the day that it was, with electric cars at one end and XR funeral march at the other. Maybe this is what you want to imagine for your first year, is instead of trying to do multiple events on multiple days, actually you take over a school or a church hall or the middle of town and have lots of local groups have a representation there, and your job is to make it all happen, and then they fill up the individual stalls and activities. For us, it was really successful. And the thing particularly about when we did it in town rather than in the school hall was lots of people are coming into town anyway. So we had this mixture of people at the market takeover, some of whom had come especially because they were environmentally motivated, and other people who'd come into town to go to Marks and Spencer's, and they found themselves in the middle of a sustainable market and actually stopped and browsed and learned loads from being there. This next slide is just photographs from that market takeover, just to give you a sense of how many different groups were involved, and also to give you a bit of inspiration. As Gail said, it's really important to get good photos. So I tip my hat to my teenage daughter who had the idea for doing this. She got a pad of art paper and wrote "is part of SustFest" on one side, and then she went through the whole market writing their name on this one, getting them to hold it and take a picture. Then she would rip that page out and go to the next stall and write their name on it, get them to hold it, take a picture, go to the next stall. And we ended up with this wonderful montage of pictures. So just to remind you to think about that is images, images, images. They're so useful for your marketing, for your website, for inspiring and engaging other people and asking them to get involved. This is you, I think, Gail.
Okay, we're coming to the end now of our presentation. Just to say, you'll find quite a lot on the Great Big Green Week about doing work to engage your politicians, to engage local, to get more residents engaging their politicians. When we first did it, Catherine mentioned it was 2015, and we ran a Postcards to Paris campaign, and we managed to get 2,000 school children from local schools. They wrote physical postcards and we took them to Paris. As you can see, our little Paris picture there below the Eiffel Tower, our little team. Now, you may not want to do exactly the same this year, but the Great Big Green Week is suggesting, for instance, that you could collect messages, photos, poems and artwork and create a wonderful display somewhere, maybe in your town centre or in your village, in the heart of your community. And you may even want to take it to COP26 and share it with them there, or you may be able to take photos of it and share it online or tag it. Whatever you do, believe that you can create something. People will get excited about doing it. We've put a little note up here about, you see one of the pictures is Count Us In. This is a global campaign that's happening at the moment, asking people to step up and be counted, to do one of 16 steps to reduce their carbon emissions. That might be something you could run with or think about. That I'm sure there are all sorts of ideas you can come up with. We've run different themes throughout the different festivals we've done. From one year we had a climate emergency petition to get our council to declare a climate emergency. It was very successful with 2,000 signatures, and we now have a council that has a sustainability and climate crisis strategy. Or it might be something about food waste is one of the things we ran. But have a look on the Great Big Green website for more ideas around this. I think that's it. Oh, one more card for Jill. There we go.
Hi, yes, this is just kind of following on from that previous slide as well, but just to mention that we've talked a lot about, you know, thinking about groups that you might want to involve in events, but it's also important kind of within your program or with your plans to think about maybe putting something together for individuals' actions, you know, that individuals can, you know, still take part. This slide here is an example of one of our ones from previous years. We're going to do a similar version for this year, and what it means we can do is, you know, we can kind of highlight some of the areas that we think people as individuals can change or get involved in, and also link it in, as Gail was saying, to, you know, global actions or, you know, bigger campaigns that are going on as well. So our one, for instance, for this year, we'll also talk about Counters In and our local hub for that. So, you know, you can make up your own versions of these or your own ideas for individual actions, but it's just nice to have something to include for people to, you know, to take away as something that they can do as individuals too. Thank you, Gail.
Okay. So I think that we've come to the end of our presentation. I hope you're all still awake. And I think we've got, have we got another poll to do now, Jazz, or are we just going to open it up to questions now, I think?
Yeah, we can do the poll now or after the Q&A.
I think there's one more to do after the Q&A, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Gail, Jill and Catherine. It's really just inspiring and exciting to see how you organise SustFest every year, especially this year in such a challenging time. So we have a space for Q&A now. So if you have any questions for us at the Climate Coalition or for Sustainable St Albans, do pop them in the chat, and we can make sure we get those answered for you. We're also joined by my colleague Fee from the Climate Coalition to answer any questions as well. Sorry, Gail, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say pop them in the chat or just put your hand up or...
I also understand, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this, but I understand that there were a few of you that had concerns when we did the poll at the start, and there were concerns that weren't in the list. So it'd be good to kind of, they might not be concerns now because you've just had a brilliant presentation from Sustainable St Albans, but if there are any niggles that are still there, do pop them in the chat just now. That'd be great. Okay, so we've got one question from Mary. Can we know who is involved in our area for networking? So I'm guessing that's for us at the Climate Coalition. Yes, the idea is that people will sign up on the map on the website, which hopefully you're familiar with. People can sign up to add an event, but they can also sign up to say they're interested in an event. So the best thing to do is to add something, even if it's only the start of an event or an idea, but just to kind of say we're organising this and we're interested in people getting involved, and then those people will be notified. So if you're happy to kind of share your details with them, you can do it that way, or then you can chat via the forum on the website. So that's the best way to do it, because so we don't have to kind of share contact details and get into that sort of thing. I hope that answers your question, Mary. If not, follow up in the chat.
Can I just add something there, Fee, to that, which is you may have a very specific idea about networking there with the Climate Coalition, but of course, you know, if you're interested in running events around the climate crisis, if you know, put I don't know where you're all from or what groups you're involved in, but you know, you put out on social media, link up to your local Friends of the Earth, link up to your local Extinction Rebellion group, who else, you know, some of your local nature groups, and just ask if people are interested in maybe having an online chat to think about running a Great Big Green Week. That would be a way I'd start it off.
Great, thank you. there's another question about how much time do we need to get going. So do one of you want to answer that?
It depends so much on how big you want your Great Big Green Week to be. So if your model is, let's hire the school hall or church hall one Saturday and have 20 stalls from 20 different groups, then that might require a relatively small organising group and not an inordinate amount of time. If, like us, you find yourself running a 2-week festival with 150 events in it, then Jill and Gail and I will all attest that it takes up quite a lot of time. And at our end of the spectrum, you know, we've got a paid part-time contractor who's doing 20 hours a week and a comms support doing 10, 12 hours a week, something like that.
But as you say, Catherine, if it's a one day, I see Phil has put a thought in place that he thinks they could organise something small scale in 4 local villages. You know, maybe that would be the same day across 4 local villages, or maybe different days, but if it's the same day across 4 villages, the planning, remember you're planning to get other people to organise this. If you organise your own thing, that's fantastic, but you won't have as much impact as asking other people to organise it. So organise their events. So remember that when you're thinking about how much time. If it was just going to be one day, what do you need? 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get that in place? I think you probably need a couple of months to make sure it all works out properly and to advertise it.
And in terms of if they're planning on going big and want to kind of I think it would take about 4 years to get up to 200 events, I imagine. But you know, if you wanted to go as big as you did in the first year, presumably it's kind of getting started as soon as possible, right? And getting the word out.
I think we were about 6 to 8 months lead up. And I think that's what we are now. To run the festival in May, we now start in September the year before. But it is a different scenario. You know, it's very different. But don't underestimate the time you need to publicise. Remember, even for a press release, if you want to advertise something that happens in 2 weeks' time, you know, you need 2 weeks run up. You've got to get that press release in, the paper's got to read it before they consider whether it goes out. So always give yourself enough time for promotion.
And another thing that's come up in we've been running more general information sessions the last couple of days. Another thing that came up is kind of taking into account the slowdown over summer. So even if you're not, it's not just schools you're talking to, everything slows down. So it's almost like try and have everything ready by mid-July, but you know, before the summer holidays, and then anything after that is a bonus. So in that case, then you're kind of front loading all of the work.
You're right, Fee. It depends how middle class your area is. If it's very middle class, then everyone goes away in August, but that's not the same everywhere. There is still a lot of people who hang around in August too. But you're right, it's a good point.
Yeah.
There's another question about being rigorous in vetting partners. I think we had that somewhere in the slide. It was about the ethical considerations of your partners. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go engaging, I don't know, the local petrol garage, do you? I mean, you really don't want that. And we have said no to some people. And at the beginning, it was a bit awkward, Catherine, if I remember. I think at one stage, we just kept banding an email around of somebody who we didn't like the look of, and we just kept saying to each other, what do we do with it? So I think we didn't know what to do with some people, but basically you want them to be engaged in sustainability in some kind. You're running it, you can say no, it's up to you.
I think there's 2 sides to that, aren't there? There's groups taking part, running an event in the festival, and then there's organisations that might help fund you. So in terms of groups want to take part in the festival, I can only think of I mean, not even a handful of events that we've had to turn away and say that we wouldn't make them part of the festival. Basically, we say if it's something to do with the environment, if it's in our dates, if it's in our district, we'll include it. I can think of one where it was a great event, but it was really focused just on human rights, not on the environment in any way. And we had a long discussion about that. And then in terms of the funding side, that's a little bit more delicate. You do need to think quite carefully. If a local business wants to sponsor you, you have to think about, are they trying to use you for greenwashing, or is it a real statement of intent to do something sustainable? And sometimes there are conversations there that have had to come to trustees, and we've had to talk it over and take a view.
Well, that's because we're a charity. But you know, if you're the group, you and your core group of 3, 4, 5 people, you make the decision. After all, it's going to come back on you if you get it wrong and if there's bad publicity. I think you always have in your head, imagine the local paper having a big splash, you know, Green Festival, you know, is funded by petrol lobby. just imagine what it will look like, and that will help you make your decision.
Great. So maybe what we'll do is we'll do the last poll, and then if anybody has any other questions, we can come back to those, and then we can wrap up, if that's okay. So over to Jazz now, because I have no idea how to do a poll.
So I'll launch the poll in a second, and the question is, after having attended this session and considering all the concerns that you had before, how prepared do you feel now to run your own Green Week? So should have launched now. Almost got all of the responses in. I think we'll leave it there. So it seems as though that most people feel more prepared now, but still need a bit of guidance. So we've got lots more information on the Great Big Green Week website. We've got organisers' guides to help you organise events, but also how to organise a Green Week, how to get local media coverage, and lots more resources. And as well, this session recording will be available. So if you need to sort of go back over any notes or anything that was said in this session, that will all be there for guidance for you whilst you're doing your organising.
And also, Jazz, you haven't got another slide with the email addresses on for the advice and support. Great, lovely.
Yeah, we'll go on to that at the end. Yes, so that was my thought exactly, that these exact people from Sustainable St Albans have very kindly offered to answer your questions. So if you can get in touch with them, we'll share the email address in a minute. And then just before, okay, so is it helpful if I talk about funding? Sorry, I thought that'd been covered already, but it's possibly helpful for me to go through that now. I'm seeing some nods. Okay, right. So basically, we are aware that it's a big job to organise a local festival or Green Week, and we want to kind of take away some of the barriers, one of which is always money, and especially the first year that you're doing it. So we've got a small pot of funding available for people organising your Green Weeks. There is the link on one of the earlier slides, but perhaps, Jazz, we could just put the link to the funding page in the chat. So that it's just there. But essentially what we want to do is to kind of help you get this off the ground. So we are particularly putting the funding towards like clusters of events, and so actual Green Weeks. If there are kind of single standalone events that are really kind of taking activism in your area to the next level and really engaging new people, really something new and exciting that you don't expect from climate change campaigning, then we'll also fund that. And in terms of the amounts that we're looking at, I think for really exciting Green Week plans, we would consider up to £10,000, which would mean that you could kind of pay for people to do some of the work. For, I think in the majority of cases we'll probably aim to fund in the kind of lower thousands, so that we're mostly just covering promotional materials, but do get in touch. So Jazz has put the link in the chat. There's hopefully there's information there. There's not loads and loads, because we don't want to make it really arduous and give you kind of 50 pages of information to read, which is the case in some funding applications. And there's a simple form to fill in, so please fill it in. One of the conditions is that you're linked with a registered organisation, so that could be a community interest company or a charity or something like that. That doesn't, if you are not one of those organisations, we hope that it will be possible for you to link with one locally and get them involved. So for example, in my personal case, I'm involved in a local waste reduction project. We were just a group of people, but we got involved with a community interest company that runs the local market, and that's how the money is administered. So we're hoping that in most cases that's possible, but if there's issues, just get in touch. And we want to kind of remove barriers as much as possible, make it as easy as possible. And then, sorry, the last bit of details is that it's basically it's open. The funding is open all the time. We're going to start looking at applications next week, but that's not the deadline. We're going to you can still apply, but we are aiming to kind of have allocated most of the money by June, because by that point kind of you need to know what money you've got. And obviously the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to get the full amount that you've asked for. So if there are any other questions about funding, I can answer them now. In which case, maybe just put your hand up if there are any other questions. And if not, then perhaps we'll just go on to the last slide and we'll wrap up. Great. So in terms of next steps, so the most important step is that you have come along here and that you're obviously interested in organising a Green Week. But what we would also love is if you could help us spread the word. So right now, we have an opportunity to get loads of people involved, and we know that a lot of that happens through word of mouth. So if you know some people in the next town along, or people on the other side of the country that are just really good local organisers, could you please just let them know that this is happening and like invite them to get involved. Again, just a personal anecdote, I think it was about 6 weeks ago, I got involved with, there's just a really super organiser in Enfield, which is my local town. And I just mentioned to him, said, do you fancy organising a local festival? And he put it out there to his network, and there's now potentially 70 events as part of the festival. So just mentioning to somebody, like, you could help us make this happen across the country. So please help us do that. But then also you can kind of, to those in your immediate network where you are kind of organising a Green Week, you'll be able to share this training and the slides, and there are lots of resources. So kind of just get out there, start talking to people, start getting people involved in organising your Green Week. You can, there will be more support and some more training coming up. So our more general information sessions, they've already happened, but we'll be putting the recordings up on the training page, which is just greatbiggreenweek.com/training, or hopefully it's helpful. It's easy enough for you to find it on the website. We're also going to have a bit of training on how to engage politicians in June, and there's going to be a monthly Q&A about kind of organising events, so you'll be able to join that. And all of the information about that is on the training and resources page. And as Gail mentioned, there's support options. So the most important support option for you is the Sustainable St Albans one. So that first email address under number 3, gbgwadvice@sustainablestantalbans.org will get you through to the people who've organised this amazing festival. So you can ask them anything that you think of afterwards, and hopefully that will help those of you that were on the second option, which is you feel more equipped to organise a local festival, but not quite there, hopefully it will move you up to the top with their help, and then you'll feel happy to do it. If you want more general support on just organising events, another one of our coalition partners, Hope for the Future, are providing a similar support service. So for them, it's the second email, which is greenweekevents@hftf.org.uk. So that's there in the slide. And then and for really general inquiries and about funding in particular, but also just general inquiries and things like how to add events to the website, then you can get in touch with us at the Climate Coalition. So that's contact@greatbiggreenweek.com. And all of those contacts will be in these slides, which we'll share afterwards. And so hopefully you will be able to get through to us one way or another, even if you don't have the exact email address. And then the last thing is to kind of put your Green Week out there, so or whatever event you're planning. So even if you don't have much shape yet, even if it's just you've pretty much just got an idea that you want to organise a Green Week of some sort, you might not know how many events, you might not know what partners, but that's fine. Just put it up on the website, because then anyone else who's looking at it will know that you're the person to talk to, and they'll know to get in touch with you. And someone who wouldn't necessarily put something up but is up for organising then knows they can get in touch with you rather than that interest just going. So please put it on the website. And I think that's it in terms of the next steps. I really look forward to seeing all of your events and Green Weeks popping up on the website, and just hearing more about your brilliant organising as it comes along. But a massive thanks to Jill and Catherine and Gail. Thank you so much. I should actually just say, these guys did a presentation. It was what, like 3 or 4 months ago, just as we were thinking about whether to do a national festival, and it was like that just kind of basically just made it. They just upped our ambition, and then we decided we wanted to see festivals all over the country. So these guys are basically responsible for the success of the Green Week. So thanks very much for presenting, and thank you the rest of you for coming, and I really look forward to seeing what you can organise. Thank you.
Thank you.